Today we're talking about the annual production cycle we follow with our goats, timing of breeding and kidding, why we do it that way, and lots of other things we've tried. I'll also share other options that are popular and successful in other areas. This episode will be a high-level walkthrough of our production calendar and the big picture view of our production system. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Before we get started on today's topic, I want to read a review titled, Goats Are Great. K&S Farms writes, just finished listening to the podcast, and I'm so excited to share this with all my new goat beginners. This is all such valuable information for when you're first starting to get into goats. Thanks, Sierra. If you'd like to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, click on the purple words, Write a Review, then give me some stars and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you, and you might just hear me share your review on the podcast. Here's what's happening on the ranch. The fence we've been working on is finally finished except for a few details and adding the hot wire, which can wait for a bit, so the fence is functional and the goats are out grazing during the day and then penned in the night trap at sunset. Night trap is a phrase we've carried over from our cattle backgrounds, and we use it to describe the predator-proof pen where the goats spend the night along with the guard dogs. They're already learning to come in on their own, which is great. It's been fun to watch their natural behavior when we're not containing them inside electric netting with only a day or two worth of feed. The goats are on the move a lot, and they've been coming in for water in the night trap about 3 times a day. At first, they weren't very good at keeping track of their kids, but they've gotten a lot better about it in the short time they've been free-ranging. The guard dogs do so much better when they have more space and more to do, so that's been good. Our 2 older dogs, Ned and Ava, have taken to picking on the youngest, Nala, who's about 1 year old, so she stays out of the night trap for now until they sort out their pecking order. Nala has been trying to be the alpha dog, and the older ones are letting her know that's not happening, so this is actually good. They discipline her when she chases, and then she pouts for a while, but in the long run, it'll be best. I don't want her to be the leader because she's not a great protector yet, as she's still a puppy. This is the first time all 3 guard dogs have been together. At least one dog has always been with the show goat herd, but now that we don't have them anymore, all 3 dogs are learning to coexist and work together. The biggest time commitment right now is the kids' 4-H livestock projects. We're dialing in their feed, practicing showmanship, exercising them, and working on fitting. I love spending time in the barn with the kids working with their animals. It's chaotic sometimes with all the goats, hogs, lambs, and steers, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I know before too many years my barn will be quiet, and I'll miss these days full of activity and learning. On to today's topic, the annual production cycle with our goats. Before breeding, which is usually in December, we make sure the does have good quality mineral available year-round, but we pay special attention going into breeding, noting how much they're consuming and that the feeders never run out. When we had show goats, we worked with our vet to use a product called Multimin, which helped with conception and fertility. You give Multimin 1 month before breeding and again a month before kidding. We don't use it now, but if you are raising show goats, that's a little piece of information to tuck away for later use. Some breeders will flush feed heading into breeding. This is when you feed nutrient-dense supplemental feed to improve fertility and ovulation. We don't do this, but it's an option to consider. We actually don't feed any supplemental grain to the commercial meat goat herd. 2 years ago, I felt like we needed to make sure we weren't creating a goat herd that was dependent on outside grain sources, so I quit feeding grain. It was a pretty bold decision, especially the timing. That was at the end of October, only 2 months before breeding, and we knew the does would be in a downward nutritional trend. But I felt very strongly about it, so we did it anyway. Turns out, that was one of the best decisions we've made. Our does are better grazers, they're more efficient, and the kidding season following the grain cutoff was the best kidding we've ever had, in spite of a record-breaking winter. The weaned kid crop was over 175%. If we have any does that need a hoof trim badly, we'll try to get those done before breeding. Most of the does we have now are naturally wearing down their hooves, but sometimes we need to help a little. We are casually selecting for does that don't need regular hoof trimming. I make notes of any does that require regular hoof maintenance and will probably not keep any of her female offspring as replacements. Trimming hooves is a big job when your numbers get high. Next is breeding season. For us, this is January, February. When you choose your breeding date, be mindful of when you may or may not want to be kidding. For us, March, April, and May are incredibly unpredictable, and blizzards are not uncommon. June is usually quite nice, but can be very hot some years, as it was this year. I'd much rather gamble on too much sunshine in June than feet of snow in April. More importantly, the does will hit their highest nutrient requirement during lactation, so we'd like them to kid as the forage is reaching its peak nutritional content. That way, we avoid having to feed as much expensive supplemental feed to meet their requirements. Matching your production cycle to available nutrients is one of the best ways to reduce costs and improve production. I'm kind of passionate about this topic because that was a huge component of my master's degree research, and I think it's overlooked by a lot of producers. We aim for 1 kidding per year per doe for us. Other producers in other areas, generally with milder climates, will often try to get 3 kid crops in 2 years. If we were to do that, that would land one of our kiddings in the middle of winter, and that is just not sustainable for us. The trade-off is no winter kidding, but we also miss a kid crop. Dairy does go in with the buck 4 to 6 weeks before the big herd, usually around November 15th. They'll kid in April or early May and produce milk for any bottle babies we may end up with when the big herd kids. Dairy does tend to be a little bit more seasonal than the meat breeds, so this works out really well, as the days are getting shorter to go ahead and breed them in November. We put bucks in with the big herd after December 28th. A big bonus with goats is that you can shift the breeding date around a little each year until you find the sweet spot. We've put bucks in as early as November 15th for mid-April kids and as late as January 5th for June-born kids. We found that the earlier breeding resulted in lower fertility and less multiples, while later breeding had higher fertility and more multiples. While I don't want a massive number of triplets, I do want does to twin as frequently as possible. When I met my commercial goat mentor, Yvonne, she confirmed my observation and actually put a date on it. She told me not to put bucks in before December 28th, so we go by that rule pretty faithfully now. Bucks have gone in January 3rd the past 2 years. Accidental breeding of 8 does last fall proved our point even further. Everything singled. We do a 4-week breeding cycle, which guarantees that all does that are cycling will have at least 1 cycle while the buck is in. Then we trade out the buck for a different one and leave him in for another 4 weeks. That's the insurance buck, just in case there's something amiss with the first one, or if any does weren't cycling or didn't settle with the first buck. After breeding, kind of March through May for us, we make sure that the does are staying in good condition, and we adjust the feed to meet their growing nutritional requirements. We make sure that water is available and not always frozen, and we keep mineral available at all times. During the slower winter months, I order tags, work on goat records, and make sure we have what we need when kidding starts. Before kidding, in May, we set up a few kidding pens. Hopefully we don't need many. With June kidding, we have switched to a pasture kidding arrangement and only use pens when we have a problem. I double-check the kidding supplies, a scale and sling, record book, tagger and tags, and iodine for most births. Gloves, suction bulb, towels, GI tube and catheter tip syringe, parachute cord, and forceps for challenging or difficult births. We don't have a lot of problem births in the commercial goat herd most years, so those things only get used occasionally. And then comes the best time of year, kidding, in June. That's when you check the goats, help when there's a problem, keep meticulous records, weigh and tag all kids, and make sure they're thriving. This is the best time of year, but it can also get very overwhelming. Try to get your eyes on every kid every day for the first couple weeks. It's not always possible, but you'll catch problems before they become a disaster if you can get that done. I'm not perfect at it. This year, we had 2 does kid next to each other, and 1 doe was claiming the other doe's kid. So we took the stolen kid, its twin, and its mom, and put them in a pen to get things figured out. When a kid suckles another doe, it takes on her scent. So this kid no longer smelled like it belonged to its real mom. After she let it suckle for a few days with some help, things seemed to be just fine. So we turned them out. We were in the middle of kidding, it was busy, and I didn't get a look at that kid for about 10 days. But when I did, it wasn't doing well at all. In fact, it was nearly dead. I tubed it with some milk and it improved immensely, but the damage was already done. Ultimately, the kid died, which possibly could have been prevented if I'd made sure to get a look at it every single day. Banding. Let's talk about this here really quickly. When you band is up to you. Some producers band at kidding, some wait until the boys are 12 weeks old. There is some evidence that wethers that are banded early may be more likely to develop urinary calculi, which can be deadly. If you wait too long to band, you'll end up with some accidental breeding like we did last year. I left a few buck prospects intact and kind of forgot about them. Well, they successfully bred 8 does when they were 4 months old. The males of some breeds develop much faster than that, so you need to be aware of your breed type and band or separate intact males before they are fertile. We had never banded at birth, but I did band some this year to try it out and see what happens. I will say that it doesn't seem to affect the kids nearly as much when they're banded younger. Older buck kids can be really set back when they're banded. I'll update when I feel like I've got enough experience with early banding to say if it works for us or not. My commercial goat mentor bands everything at kidding except for a handful of buck prospects, and they've not had a problem in over 30 years of raising goats. She has written a book about raising meat goats, and it's one of the best books out there for practical, real-life goat raising information, and I'll link that in the show notes. Alright, after kidding season, this is July through October for us. This is when it's all about growing those goats. As I talked about earlier, we are trying different things to optimize targeted intensive grazing with how the goats want to naturally graze. We'll talk about this more in future episodes, but for now, the goal is to keep feed in front of the goats and keep the kids growing. This may be contract grazing for weed control and fire breaks in the future as well. Weaning usually happens in October. This is when we separate the kids from the does and they will no longer be able to suckle. At this point, many of the kids will have already been weaned by their dams, and all of the kids have been eating forage well for a few months. At weaning, we weigh the kids, review their records, and make selections for our replacement does and replacement does for sale. We evaluate the prospect bucks and band anything that doesn't meet the standards for breeding and herd improvement. Then, everything else is a meat goat. In the past, we have sold all of those at the auction, but we're moving more toward a direct-to-consumer marketing model, and I'll update you on that as we learn more and find the best way to do that. Next comes selling. That's usually in November, when we sell the goat kids that aren't staying here as replacement breeding stock. This year, I expect to sell close to 100 commercial meat goats. As we move more to a direct sale model, I expect we'll be keeping kids around a little longer. And that's our year raising goats. I hope you enjoyed this overview of our production calendar and maybe picked up a few ideas to use in your own goat raising journey. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.